What happened is when it said that and it grabbed, like touched him, he said, my brain couldn't compute what was going on. He said, I passed out. I fainted. So he said, I hit the ground next to the fire, and his buddy decided, hey, I got to help him. I'm going to drag him away from the fire. This thing, he said, his buddy told him that this thing grabbed him by the wrist and he had a knee brace where he had knee surgery. He was rehabilitating from knee surgery. But he had a knee brace. It grabbed the knee brace and his wrist and drug him out into the middle of the pipeline and left him. And then he wakes up, and his buddy's like, hey, I thought maybe you were dead, you know. He said, no, why? He said, how'd I get out here? He said, well, you passed out. And he said, that thing drug you out into the middle of the pipeline. Maybe we're not talking about, you know, an actual Sasquatch Bigfoot. Maybe we are talking about maybe some, you know, like he said, some weird, like some feral person or wild person, that, you know, that just happened to be covered in hair. But it wasn't, he said it wasn't real thick hair. You could see skin through all over it.
This is God's country. It's what we like to call it. Almost heaven, West Virginia. A lot of peaks and valleys. Not so much like the Rocky Mountains, but we do have a lot of rock outcrops, beautiful venues. You've been to Seneca Rocks. Nelson Rocks is another great place that people can go and climb, and just the vistas, they're just amazing.
As far as the entire forest, I mean, it's 921,000 acres, and the terrain is, I would say, diverse. You have regular forest, hardwood forest. You'll get into the higher elevations, which has some spruce forest. You'll get into areas like Dolly Sod's part of that. You know, there's a high plateau. Then you'll get into places like the Canaan Valley area, Blackwater Falls, you know, Canaan Loop area, that are spruce, some other smaller stuff, but you have peat bogs. You have what we call the peat bogs, or the blister swamps, or what we would call them. Some of us call them. Then other places you'll have rock outcroppings and sheer cliffs, and so it's pretty diverse as far as, even though 921,000 acres sounds huge, it's really not when it comes to something as far as that. But within that area, it's just crazy amount of, or the type of things you can run into.
Be ready for the mountains and the twists and the turns and the brake problems on your cars when you come over here. I don't know how these people keep brakes on their vehicles over here. It's lifestyle is a little different over here than it is in Virginia. People are out in the woods more here than they are in Virginia. In Virginia, we've gotten a little soft. It's like, we'll go out in the mountains if we were going to go hunt, or if you're going to go trout fish or something. But the people over here in West Virginia, they live in the mountains. So, they're a little more hard people than us softies over in Virginia. So it's a difference there. The people are different.
You definitely have, your white-tailed deer. You have your normal little varmints. You have squirrels, skunks, possums, coons, all that stuff, the average stuff. there is a pretty good population of black bear here in this area. Also in Dolly Sods, the black bear population is pretty high. Coyotes, the Blackwater Fall, or no, sorry, some in Blackwater Falls area and Dolly Sods area, and I guess around here in Spruce, there are timber rattlers, especially in the Dolly Sods area. A lot of people see them up there, and I've seen video. I have not seen one yet, but I do follow a Facebook page about that up there, and people post about seeing them. So, there are some dangers. You just got to, be careful where you're at. But other than that, there's the occasional. You'll hear the stories about mountain lions and stuff, which that's all over the state of West Virginia. But I've never seen one. I've had people tell me, we've seen multiple ones, but I've been out here and I've never seen one. I've never even had that feeling like when people talk about being maybe stalked by one. You get that hair on the back of your neck standing up. I've never had that experience as far as that's concerned.
It's a great place. If you love the outdoors, this is a place to be. You can come and visit. And there's Bigfoot here.
There are many places that something could hide. When you get back in some of these areas, there's rock outcroppings. I hate to say they might, the whole cave theory, because I don't think they really live in caves, but I think they could get into caves and take shelter. But the food is abundant here. Especially like the Dolly Sods area or the Davis or Thomas and Davis area, Canaan Loop area. You have deer, you have other animals, you have fish. All these streams are stocked with fish. Not only stocked, but they have native fish, trout fish in them. And like the Dolly Sods area and the Canaan Loop area, and like in the cranberry area, it is just abundant with different types of cranberries, huckleberries, blueberries. So you have that kind of food source for them to have. And again, it's so dense. I mean, we're literally, what do you say? Not even an eighth of a mile. Like maybe 1,000 feet from the forest road here, and you can't see more than 50 to 100 feet from where we're standing. Yeah, when the leaves come on some of these other trees, and then it gets it seems to get darker a lot earlier because the canopy's so thick. So yeah, there's definitely room for things to hide.
There's a lot of farmland here, so if they would like to steal chickens, steal turkeys, I know people dump those things from time to time if they have something that would die for some reason. But like I say, if people actually dump, which they're not supposed to, something dies and they just dump it somewhere, that's easy pickings, And I've seen deer along the road, that have just laid until they rotted to pieces. Maybe the vultures would get them, but there's so many deer here, so much roadkill, that it would be easy for, any animal that would want to scavenge a roadkill to get something to eat here. So yeah, I see it all the time. Yeah. It's sad, but fact of life. But then you've got, like now this time of year, stuff is starting to come up. Ramps are coming up. The mushrooms will be popping up soon with the rain. It's already been wet, so the mushrooms will start to pop pretty soon. There's a lot of stuff for them to eat here. There's a lot of deer, other small game that they can catch and eat. And the water, there's a lot of water here. A lot of water in Pelton County. There are flood control dams all up and down through this area. You don't realize it. If you fly over in a plane, you'd be really surprised at the amount of dams that are here. So lots of lakes, ponds, just plenty of resources for the black bear here are very plentiful. So, if you could sustain something like black bear, that's the big argument. You can have a squatch that could live just as easily as a black bear.
Wildlife population, they have to eat. Their number one, of course this is all speculation, we don't know anything for sure, but being an animal of some sort, they have to eat. And they're not going to go to a grocery store. So they have to have food first and foremost, food and water. And I don't think the deer population is any higher anywhere else than it is right here in West Virginia. There are deer everywhere here in West Virginia. So they hunt in family groups. It's been witnessed to, people have seen them hunt in family groups, and they chase down deer, snap a leg, try to find the next one, you know. And so it's easy food for them. It's just because of the abundance.
You've been looking into the Bigfoot stories across the state for a long time, and I know you've focused on parts of this part of the state too.
Yeah.
What have you noticed over the years in terms of like what people have talked about with Bigfoot stories in these areas?
I noticed that there's not really a huge similarity sometimes with them. I mean, a lot of times you hear people, they're this size. I've heard many things about them. You know, different collars, different sizes. You know, just some are odd. You know, some of you hear about the hulking beast. You know, 7-8 feet tall, and then one I took a report several years ago, or not several. It's been like 2018. The woman, she said the best way I describe it, it looked like a black, hairy, like the Grinch from The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. It had a pot-belly gut and stuff. Yeah, that's in Davis. They call it the Canyon Monster. That's where there was some, it was in the 60s, I believe it was. Some boys were out camping in the Blackwater Falls Canyon area. And they had a camp set up, and one was picking up wood or chopping wood or something like that. And he bent down and stood back up, and he felt something poke him like in the ribs, and he turned around and was looking at this thing. And I won't say face to face every time, but it wasn't face to face because they said it was like 7 or 8 feet tall. Black in color, and had, they said, eyes that were like the balls of hell, fire of hell or whatever. I don't know if they meant it was actually glowing, or maybe the fire was reflecting its eyes, but they did say it was like red color. And I thought that was interesting, a story. So I started looking into more about that area, and I found another story from, I think it was the 70s. Well, I didn't find it. The lady actually sent it to me when I put the Canyon Monster thing on Facebook. She sent me an email. It was an anonymous email. She didn't put a name. And she said that her and her husband were driving along in the Davis and Thomas area somewhere. I forget exactly where, but one of these things crossed the road, and that's what they described it as a black, hairy creature, and its eyes looked like they were red. One of the reports that I've taken from the Dolly Sods area doesn't fit your typical Bigfoot type story. To me, it falls in more relic hominid or feral person type story, and it's a rather strange story. So it just varies. I mean, it just depends on who you talk to.
It seems like there are certain times a year when you're going to have more sightings. Obviously, hunting season, because there are more people in the woods during hunting season. But you have a lot of activity in hunting season. But I think springtime's a really good time because, like I said, the food's starting to come up again, so there's more opportunity. What do they do in the wintertime? Maybe they gather food, they can hunt deer, just like humans do in the wintertime. The early settlers, they had to survive through the winter with what they could get off the land. So, I think Squatchers are the same way. They're smart enough to know that they need to gather some food up for the winter time. Well, when I grew up, you didn't hear anything much about Bigfoot other than out in the Northwest. I was probably 8 years old when the Patterson-Gimlin film came out, which kind of piqued your interest if you were interested in that type of cryptid. But then you started hearing stories from local people, and you didn't put two and two together. But then when the Legend Boggy Creek came out, you thought, oh, wait a minute, that's where is this Arkansas, and you're thinking that's nowhere near the Northwest, so could there be something like that in this area? And then if you talk to older people here, they would come forth at some point and say, well, I've seen things I can't explain, or I was actually talking to my doctor. He was from Pennsylvania, and he said, oh, you're looking for Bigfoot? Let me tell you a story about my dad when we were growing up in Pennsylvania. So, if you bring up the subject of Bigfoot, people will tend to talk.
Kind of open up.
Yeah.
Is there a story you've heard from like an old timer that really kind of stuck out to you?
Yeah, it was not actually from him, but a man who knew him. They were in Sugar Grove, West Virginia. This guy drove like 35 miles an hour all the time. And they were coming back in from Virginia down we just call it Sugar Grove Road. And one came up over the bank and was chasing his car and keeping pace with his car. So he finally sped up and got away from it. His wife was terrified, but he swore up and down, that this thing chased him. And, so you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy. But then I actually had an uncle who was a truck driver who saw one. And then a local gentleman here on the same mountain, I believe, saw one. And that was pretty intriguing. And I think West Virginia Magazine, I can't remember the year, actually did a story on Bigfoot. And so that was really cool. But I was followed out of the woods at one point when I was 12 or 13 years old and couldn't explain it, didn't know, what it might have been. I knew it really terrified me at the time. And once the internet came out and you started reading stories on Bigfoot, then you put two and two together and say, okay, I think I had a Bigfoot encounter. But yeah, there are a lot of stories around this area. Pelton County seems like a hot spot in West Virginia for Bigfoot sightings. And there's a lot of stuff not published. People don't like to be ridiculed, so they won't necessarily come out and just say, oh yeah, I believe in Bigfoot. Let me tell you what happened to me. But if you kind of gain their confidence and talk to them a little bit, eventually they'll come forward and say, okay, well, yeah, I'll tell you what happened to me.
Do you have a favorite encounter that you've heard from this part of the state, or something? Favorite investigation or anything like that?
It would probably be the one from the Roaring Plains area. That I don't know exactly what this guy was experiencing. That would probably be it. I mean, as far as a full-on story, other than like, hey, I seen this creature. I mean, this was like a story laid out the way he described it, and I mean, he told me the story over a span of almost like an hour and a half to 2 hours, talking about him and his buddy were camping. I actually listened to it again. I found the recorder. I thought I lost the story. I actually listened to it on the way down and refreshed my mind on it. And I've been telling the story a few times over the years. Well, I told a few things wrong on it. I took bits and pieces of it that I remembered and put them out of sequence. But he was talking about being in the Roaring Plains area for a short part of it. They started noticing that they hear pebbles or something hitting the tent while they were in the tent the first night. His buddy kept saying he felt like they were being followed when they were hiking. Then they get back to the tent or back to the camp, and again they were outside the camp. Stuff was being thrown. Well, they thought each one of them thought the other one was doing it. They like, hey, quit messing with me. Don't. And then they found out, no, this is coming from the woods. So they, again, decided to go to the Roaring Plains area because the one fella had already been to the meadows. The other one didn't go because he had gotten sick. And he comes back, he says, you got to go with me. And so they go, and they're in the meadows, and they're coming, or he goes to the meadows, the other guy had gotten sick has went back. As he's coming back, he notices this thing outside the tent, and it's looking in the tent. Well, his buddy's in the tent. I thought like I said, I made a mistake on some of the stories. He told me about this buddy being in the creek. Well, that's when he got sick, when he was in the creek. But he'd already made it back to the camp, and he sees this thing outside the tent, and he walks up, and he notices it stands up, and he said, this thing is massive. It's like 7 to 8 feet, 7.5 feet tall or something there. And it's all hairy, but he's thinking, this is one of them hairy wild people that he's, basically a feral person, he's thinking. It takes off. His buddy's in the tent, and he's like, when he got back there, this thing was in the tent and was backing out, and that's what he saw was his legs backing out of the tent. And so his buddy's like, I want to go home. I want to go to the truck. I want to get out of here. He said, no, man. He said, this thing didn't hurt nobody. He said, it's just, he said, it's somebody in a suit or something, and or whatever, some weirdo. So they stayed. He said, well, if it comes back, you're dealing with it. So it was a bright moon. He said it was a full moon night, and he said to his buddies, like, hey, it's back outside. Your buddy's outside. And he looks out, and there's things standing out there, and he gets out, and he's looking at it. He gets out of the tent, and he said, hey, we're trying to talk to it, and he said he started walking toward it, and he's looking at it. He said that's when he kind of realized that this thing isn't somebody in a costume. It's real. And he said it's like a big naked hairy man. So he walks over, and he puts his arm, has his arm out, and this thing puts his arm out, and he grabs the arm. And that's when he said, oh my God, you are real. And just like, and he said that's when it tried to mimic him. He said, but when it said, you're real, he said it didn't add the L. It just would go, you're real, like that. And, well, it takes off again. It leaves. So, well, no, it didn't take off at that time. What happened is when it said that, and it grabbed, like touched him, he said, my brain couldn't compute what was going on. He said, I passed out. I fainted. So he said, I hit the ground next to the fire, and his buddy decided, hey, I got to get out of here to help him. I'm going to drag him away from the fire. This thing, he said, his buddy told him that this thing grabbed him by the wrist, and he had a knee brace where he had knee surgery. He was rehabilitating from knee surgery. But he had a knee brace. It grabbed the knee brace and his wrist and drug him out into the middle of the pipeline and left him. And then he wakes up, and his buddy's like, hey, I thought maybe you were dead, He said, no, why? He said, how'd I get out here? He said, well, you passed out. And he said, that thing drug you out into the middle of the pipeline. So he got back to the camp and stuff, and they were like wanting to go. Everybody's wanting to go. He said, no. He said, he never hurt nobody. He said, and he's still thinking it's just some weird weird, like whatever. Somebody, he's not thinking Bigfoot or anything. And the way he describes it, I'm not sure if that's what he has seen either. Because you hear about the feral people of Appalachia, and I think it may have been one of those, because how he explained it or described it is having the features, because he said he was a physical anthropology student at the time, and he knew he knew about the Denisovians and some other stuff. He said it kind of had that brow ridge and the wide nose like a Denisovian. He said it would almost, he said if he was in Australia, Australia, he said it would remind him more of an Aboriginal from Australia, but just not the dark complexion. So they eventually, things went on. They eventually leave. They go back. They go back sometime later again, and they encounter this thing again. And this is where I messed up in the story. I always thought that it was from the first encounter. The second encounter, they're around camp, and this thing actually brings in a deer, and it just right there in front of them decides to start taking the deer apart to eat this deer. Not trying to like cook it or anything like that, like tearing pieces off this deer. And he said it was extremely eerie, because he said you look over and you see this thing chewing on this deer, biting into this like deer leg or whatever. His face is covered in blood. And he said the fire is like reflecting off. He said it's the most ominous, freaky thing he's ever seen in his life. But he said over the years, he's never experienced anything else again in that area. He eventually moved to Colorado, lost, a whole, interest in it. Come back here. He now lives in Pocahontas County. He's talked to other people that have had heard or experienced stuff. He said that most of the old folks in that area call it the Yahoo or Yahoo. He just called it. He said I just call it the spirit of the woods. He said because the area there just had this vibe to it, and he said it was like the spirit of the woods. He said I just gave it the name Spirit of the Woods. He said, was it a Bigfoot? He said I don't know. He said he said I know it wasn't an actual person, like a normal person.
What do you think of that story when you first heard it? I mean, what was your first reaction?
I kind of, I listened to it really intently because he was real matter of fact about it. It wasn't like he's sitting there and he rattled it off. He experienced something, in my opinion. I mean, some of it seems a little kind of out there, but again, maybe we're not talking about, an actual Sasquatch Bigfoot. Maybe we are talking about maybe some, like you said, some weird, like some feral person or wild person, that just happened to be covered in hair. But it wasn't, he said it wasn't real thick hair. You could see skin through all over it. So it wasn't like you hear some of these others that these creatures are completely covered in fur or hair, can't see through it. He said you could see through it. And it had almost like he said like an Italian, that dark complexion, bronze, brownish color or something like that, skin. So, yeah.
Wow. That is I've never heard that one before. That's wild.
Yeah.
And that whole topic of the feral people, I mean, that's obviously something I think a lot of people in the Bigfoot world kind of look at and differentiate. Have you heard any other stories of feral people like that, or not really?
I mean, not from like a first-hand accounts, but if you read some of the older like newspaper accounts, that's definitely what people probably were running into, what they called the wild man. It was probably feral people, especially the ones that they would see. They're covered in hair, have hair, long hair on their head, and have tattered clothing on. That's definitely what those were. But as far as a first-person account, no, that's the only one I've really taken.
Now, do you have a favorite or particularly interesting encounter that maybe you've heard over the years, or someone told you, or you've researched that kind of sticks out to you that's just like, this is my favorite or very interesting?
There's a gentleman who has a little shop downtown, and he was a truck driver. This was, back in, I want to say, the early 80s. I can't remember for sure the timeline, but he was a truck driver, and he had stopped to check his load straps and had gotten down out of the cab of the truck. And he had talked to some gentlemen south of here who had a hunting camp that had some activity, and told him, these things are here, they're real. And they said, if you ever smell anything that smells like death, they said, they're around. So he gets out of his truck, and he's walking around his truck, he's checking stuff out, and he goes to get back in his truck, and he smells this horrible smell, and turns and looks in his headlights, and there's one standing looking at him. And he said his knees kind of got weak, and he crawled back up in the cab of his truck, and the thing just turned and walked off. But yeah, I'm sure he took a lot of heat over that for a long time. But my dad was still alive at the time, and we talked to him about it, and we were really excited for him, and the fact that, hey, somebody saw a Bigfoot here, so it's hard to discount and tell somebody they didn't see what they saw. Now, just this past year, a friend of mine was going to pick up his boys from ball practice, and one ran along the road. He said it was at least 8 feet tall, very broad shoulders, fast, very fast. And he said it ran, and he saw it for a few seconds, and then it just disappeared. And I said, you mean it dropped down over the bank or went into the woods? He said, no, it disappeared. So, I'm not into what we call the woo. I don't think it ran into a portal or went underground. So I kind of chatted with Russ Jones about this a little bit, and we think your mind is seeing something that's not supposed to be there. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm not seeing this. Your mind is telling you that can't be real. He said, but I know what I saw. He said, there's no doubt in my mind that's what it was. And he was not a believer until that point. And once that happened to him, he said, okay. I tried to get him to do a report, but he said he didn't want his name associated with it for the rest of his life, as being another Bigfoot guy. So, but he said, I know what I saw. Yeah. And he took me, I said, well, show me where it was. And there's actually have been sightings around that area clear back into the 60s. I've gotten reports from close to that area. So, yeah. But it's strange because it was at the end of a driveway. And there were several houses right there close by. And I thought, why would it cross the road there? It seems strange, but we don't know why they do what they do and why they go where they go. If we did, we'd have one in a cage.
Yeah, it would have been over by now.
It'd have been over by now.
Yeah.
We're in Monongahela National Forest. We're just probably 10 or so miles, maybe 10 or 12 miles below Spruce Knob, a couple miles below the lake. I mean, people that know the area would know where I'm talking about. I mean, it used to be a little community here. It was called Osceola. I guess back in the day it was an old logging town. It's no longer here, like a lot of the old towns are, have gone to the wayside. But yeah, it's just a cool area that I discovered. Somebody told me about it, there being vocals from this area, and it was a cool area, or a cool spot that I found. And if I had a research area, this is probably it. Because I mean, I go all over the place, but this is where I keep coming back to when I can. And I found a few interesting things here. So, and had a couple experiences that I don't know if they were Bigfoot related, but it was pretty neat. I casted it mainly because the hill was extremely wide. It wasn't like narrow, like if it was a boot or somebody's foot. It was pretty much right here between these two trees. And then as I was looking around, I found another one up that way that kind of matched it. They weren't, like I said, I was telling the guys earlier, it wasn't like it was a trackway. There was just a couple prints. The really cool thing that happened after that, as I'm walking, I'd stay along the creek mainly to use it as a guardrail, for hiking instead of having to worry about following GPS stuff. So I'd stay along the creek, and I started hearing what I thought was like chattering, mumbling type noise. So I just passed it off. It's just what they call the babble of the creek. It's just my ears playing tricks on me. But while these were setting up, I decided I'll go up a little ways, cut off to the right, and then go in so far and come back down just to make like a grid type, whatever you want to call it, and look for substrate similar to that. That black wet stuff. Well, I found a couple spots up there, and I looked at the first one, didn't find anything. Got to the second one, and I'm looking around, and I don't see anything, or I don't see any tracks. But I started hearing like if I'm looking at here, there's a rock face with some, a bank with some rocks sticking out behind me, and some laurel bushes and stuff. I start hearing something move in that brush. And I'm thinking, maybe it's a deer, maybe it's a bear. So I hurried, if it was a bear, I hurried up and turned around and looked. And when I did, something went running the opposite direction. I don't know what it was. I didn't see anything, but it went just barreling through the woods. But I do know there's cows here. A cow most likely wouldn't just take off running like that. They're not generally. And so I come back down here. The prints were set. I pulled them. I'm like, this is a really cool area. I want to come back here. So the following week I come back, and I'll have to send you the pictures of this. I come in, and right here between this tree here And this one, there was like these smaller trees, but there's no limbs on them. There's like long sticks, and they had been placed in an X between those two trees. And I was like, why? I don't understand why they would be there, because nobody knew I was here the week before. Nobody knew I was coming back. So why would somebody do that to play a trick on me? And I still don't know why they were there or who done it. But people have speculated, oh, that's these things telling you not to come back. You're not welcome here. I mean, I know that's purely speculation, so I see it that way. But I've been back here a bunch. I've come back several times. I was here again in October with some friends. We went up, like I said, I found that print over in here. Went up around, there's some rock outcroppings or whatever you want to call them up here. It's got some big crevices in. We was up there looking at those. And that's where we found what looks like what people will call a structure, the teepee type structure. But the only thing about it that caught my interest, and in part of it, there was like I guess, out west they call it the floating beam or whatever in their structure. It kind of had that look to it. So we checked it out and didn't find anything interesting on it, no hair or anything like that, and just took some pictures and documented that we found it. And thought it was pretty cool to find. But this is one of my favorite areas to come and just explore.
I can see why.
We're in the National Forest. We're pretty deep in the National Forest as far as like coming away from civilizations, I guess you'd say. But we're not that far off the road. But when you get quarter mile back in here, it's thick. There's nothing back here to, you can hide back here about anything if you wanted to. I've heard a couple stories mentioned about the Seneca Creek Backcountry Trail. Again, I'll say this. I don't know if they seen anything, but it was the quintessential, they were being followed or paced out from the trail. Could have been some weirdo hikers, because it is a pretty busy trail. Absolutely. But, these people that posted them, one was actually a lady a few years ago, was pretty terrified. She was hiking out and she couldn't see anything, but she could hear this thing, or whatever you want to call it, just paralleling her out to the trailhead.
What do you think is kind of the best evidence you've seen out of these kind of areas, these hills here?
I mean, I found a couple prints that it could be prints. The best one I found was in the Canaan Loop area. As far as the evidence I found, I mean, definitely, and talking to the people and getting their accounts and hearing the stories and seeing some of their reactions of the reactions from when they're telling the story, whether you can believe them or not, you can definitely tell, especially when, they're having what I call a trigger reaction, when they tell that story. To me, that's some of the best evidence. Some people don't believe so, but to me that is, when you can actually talk to some people or talk to people and they can, and you've gained their trust and confidence to talk to you and they can share that story. To me, that's what it's about for me. I'm not out here to prove that these things do exist. I don't go out here like, oh yeah, hey, here's this. They do exist here. I don't know, because I've not had a sighting of my own. I just know I'll document what I find, and I'll try my best to explain what I find. My best most times to debunk what I find, and I always put that disclaimer when I show people. This is me documenting something. This could be what it is, and this could be what it's not, or there might be something else. So, but I always point at like the prints that I found nearby, or partial prints. The reason I kept those is because I found that they were interesting because the heel was really extremely wide. It wasn't like a normal a human foot or a boot. It had a wide rounded heel, and I just thought they were interesting. They're not the most definitive prints, but they were something I wanted to document and keep. It's a short video of like this. Well, what it is, it's a video that a YouTube channel posted. I forget the name on the YouTube channel. It's the only video on the channel. It's, I think, trying to remember how long it is. It's not super long. It's just seconds long, and it's in an area kind of like this, and it's foggy. It's misty, and you see this thing walking. You know, the guy was actually out geocaching, and supposedly caught this on camera. It walks in behind trees and into an open, like a somewhat a semi-opening, and he believes it was a Sasquatch. And you don't see great definition because of the camera, I guess, plus the moisture, but you see the silhouette, and the arms look extremely long. You know, I think that's pretty cool. You know, some people say it's a hoax. Some other people say no, they've had other experiences in that area. Another person I talked to said they actually went to that area and know, because it was on near one of the ski trails, and they kind of went out and kind of judged how tall this thing could have been, and it was supposedly substantially tall. But as far as, is it a legitimate Bigfoot? I don't know. It's one of them, you know. Yes, maybe, maybe not. So.
West Virginia is where I had my first Bigfoot expedition, and my first experience as a group, other than my scream that I got screamed at for the very first thing. But yeah, I've witnessed a lot of firsts here in West Virginia. Blackwater Falls, my favorite place. I will always hold that place near to my heart because that's where I first went on my first Bigfoot expedition. And so I witnessed eye glow there for the first time. You know, these things have the ability to internally illuminate their eyes, and I witnessed that there for the first time. And I've seen it since then at least a dozen times. So they have the ability to internally illuminate their eyes to glow, but they can also, like, sounds crazy, I know, and until you witness it for yourself, most people don't even believe it's even possible, but they can actually cast a light that shines like kind of like a flashlight from their eyes, and it is typically white. I've seen that 3 times, and let's see, I've seen that in Virginia, Kentucky, and Maryland. I haven't seen that in West Virginia, but the eye glow I have seen in West Virginia several times. My first one that I saw was a bluish green tint over at Blackwater Falls, so it was interesting.
I was with 2 other gentlemen, and there was another group on a trail here, and we were converging into an intersection. We got there first, sat down on a log, and one of the gentlemen pulled out a harmonica and started to play. We had cut our lights off, and I was sitting there with my thermal and just looking around and just being quiet and listening. And I said, "Play your harmonica," and we called back and forth to a barred owl several times and played with him. And then he stopped playing, and we just sat there in the quiet, and a rock came in from behind us and hit a tree in front of us and cracked like a shot, and that was a real eye-opener. So I thermed up on the hill, nothing, couldn't see anything, no hot spot anywhere. So I got on the radio and called the other group, and then we actually had some beavers down below us slapping their tails on the water, which we thought at first might have been something throwing rocks in the water, but once we saw the beavers, we said, okay, we think maybe that was the beaver splashing. But the beavers weren't up on that hill throwing rocks at us. So I don't know if they liked the harmonica playing and they didn't want any more of it, or they wanted to hear another tune. But yeah, the rock throwing incident was, you know, what throws rocks in the woods? You know, there's nobody else around. It's the middle of the night. We're sitting there in the dark. So the only way something would know that we were there, if it could see us in the dark or smell us in the dark, but could hear that harmonica playing, but didn't hit us with a rock, but threw a rock in our direction hard enough that it got our attention. There was actually a story I wanted to tell you that
Absolutely, yeah. Anything you got?
my sister encountered. It's a place they call Seldom Seen. So, that tells you a little bit about that area. She and a friend, this was when they were in high school, went to this farm, and they were riding a Trail 90, and they come up into this field, and they see something big and black take off at the field and go into the woods. So they immediately, it scares them, so they turn around and go back. And then the girl that's riding the Trail 90 turns and says, "Let's go back and see what that was." And she said, No, don't you go back up there. I don't want to go back up there. So they let it go at that. That night, they had a loft in the barn where they had a room set up. So the girls were going to spend the night up there in the loft. Well, that night, rocks, not big rocks, but about yay size, and pebbles started hitting the roof on the barn. And it scared them, but they thought it's her brothers are out there throwing rocks on the roof trying to scare them. They're like, ha ha ha, real funny. So they go to sleep. The next morning they get up, they go in the house for breakfast, and they're saying something to the boys about, "Hey, yeah, nice trying to scare us, throwing rocks on the roof of the barn last night." And they're like, "What are you talking about? We have no idea what you're talking about." So they said, "We were not out of the house last night." Their parents said, "Was not them." So there was another rock throwing incident, and that was, back in the early 70s, mid 70s. Yeah, probably about the mid 70s. So I know a gentleman I personally know, back in the 60s, they were spotlighting deer. And I pulled this report, which had a very strange phone number, and this phone number is overseas. This gentleman was retired military. Back in the 60s, you could spotlight deer, but you couldn't have a gun in the car. And they actually spotlighted 2 squatches in a place we call Deer Run. And they thought it was a bear at first, until it stood up, walked across the field, and stepped across a rail fence on 2 legs. And they said, okay, that was no bear. So I actually discovered one of the gentlemen that was with him, I know, and he said, "Well, let me tell you a story." So I was like, okay, here we go. He said, "What did he say it was?" And I said, "He said it was a Bigfoot." He said, "Okay." He was deer hunting, avid hunter. It was a very foggy morning, and he said something was pacing him through the woods just out of sight. He said there was something walking, and it sounded like on 2 legs. So he said, "I walked towards it," and it would walk away. And he said, then I'd go back over to where I was going, continue on, and he said, same thing. It was pacing me through the woods. He said, so I stopped, started towards it, and it walked away. He said, I never could see it. It was too foggy. He said, it freaked me out. He said, I got scared. He said, I've got a high-powered hunting rifle with me. He said, but I went back to the house. I did not hunt anymore that day. So, yeah, what does that? Not a lot that makes sense. So you just keep adding those stories up. Rock throwing, following you through the woods. You're finding scat, you're finding tracks. They're here. There should be enough evidence that, hopefully Darby proves it, and we can all say, I told you so.
You mentioned, there's more people kind of living. Obviously, West Virginia has a smaller population, but there's more people living in the mountains. Why do you think then that West Virginia has, I would say, a higher percentage of sightings than Virginia? Is it just because of terrain?
You got to be there to see it. So, you know, people live in the woods. So, I mean, they'll have their houses built on the side of a mountain. So they live their daily lives in the woods, in the mountains where these things live. And these things are curious. So they will come near civilization. You don't have to go far to witness Bigfoot activity. In fact, if I'm looking on a map to try to pick out a place that I want to go do some research, some of the things that I look for is actually close to civilization, because these things are curious. They don't have a lot of stuff to do. Their lives consist of just surviving, you know, finding food, finding shelter, I guess, or, you know, some place to stay out of a storm, weather through a storm or something. But so they're curious. They're curious of us hairless people, I guess you would say. But they come close to civilization. I look for power lines, places that have been cut out for power lines. I look for small bodies of water. These things tend to gather near both of those. They use the power lines for easy travel. You know, and that usually consists of civilization. So we don't have to go that far for these things.
I think the attitudes have changed. People are more willing to accept it. Bigfoot's big business now, a lot of money in Bigfoot, but I'm not in it for the money. I'm just in it for the curiosity, you know, making friends through Bigfoot. I made some great friends through Bigfoot, lifelong friends. But yeah, people have been a little more acceptable of the Bigfoot phenomenon.
You know, the people here, the people in West Virginia are fantastic. It reminds me of my family. I'm from Alabama originally, so the people in West Virginia are a lot like the people in Alabama. They're just great people, good home family people, and they'll do anything for you. If you need help, they're there to help you. You know, it's just, I love the state. It catches a lot of flack from others who don't understand the state, but West Virginia is great. You got to be here to experience it.
I think this is just a great place that's kind of underrated as far as Bigfoot goes. I know Bobo told us one time that he loved it here and he would like to do more squatching on the East Coast, and West Virginia was one of the places he wanted to come to because there's plenty of mountainous area and there's not a lot of population here. You know, I don't know, as far as our town here, might be 800 people, but county-wise, I'm not sure what the last census said, but it's very easy for something to hide here, and if it doesn't want to be seen, you're not going to find it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. There's a lot of things to see here. Don't be afraid, you know, of the stories, you know. And also, if you do hear the stories, don't be a fool. Come out here and like try to do whatever, you know, be a gung-ho. Be respectful. You know, this is a national forest. You know, people do visit here a lot. Just be respectful. Is there something here? I don't know. You know, is there? I don't know. I mean, there have been stories and stuff, and is there legitimacy to them stories? Some of them I believe so, you know, and then there are a few that, no, you tell there's not. But just come out and explore. If you don't get out here and explore, you'll never know what you'll find. You know, you can't just sit there. I mean, it's fine to do your research at your house, you know, do your historical research, do your research of the terrain. You know, look for that, the three things: food, water, and shelter. You know, everything needs it. Look for that area. And if you think you found an area that some of these things might exist, just be careful. Go out there and remember, there are things here that can hurt you. You know, it may not be animals. There's, like in this area here, you can just be walking along and you'll find a hole between roots, or you'll find a rock crevice that's covered, and you'll fall. You know, you can hurt a leg, and you're a good ways from any hospital. There's no phone service here. it's not that easy to get out of here, especially, like me. My wife gets on me all the time because I'm out here by myself for the most part. So that's why, if you do it that way, I do it with my wife. She knows where I'm going. Like when I come here, she already has the coordinates of where I'm going. I turn on my location on my phone. We actually downloaded another tracking thing on our phone. It's called Life 360. It's for free. She can follow me around. At least she'll know where I'm at. And not only do I tell her, but I tell my son, and I tell a couple of my friends. Tammy and Danny usually know where I'm at, and they've been here with me. So
awesome. And is there, if people want to report a sighting to you or send you a story, you want to just kind of plug yourself and your channel and that kind of thing? In fact,
yeah, you can. I do a YouTube channel. Like I said, like I tell people, it's not a great channel. I just get on the document. I don't do no fluffy stuff. You can see it on YouTube. It's WV Case, or WV Cryptids and Strange Encounters, which stands for WV Case. But I think pretty sure you had to type that out, just WV Cryptids and Strange Encounters, not West Virginia. I'm also on Facebook under that, or you can look me up, Les Odell, on Facebook. Email westvirginiacase304@yahoo.com is where I usually get. I used to have another one, but it got so much junk on it, so I had to start a new one. That's the new email. People can send me their stories or whatnot, and then we go through. Once I get that, I can go back through email and eventually we'll exchange numbers and chat and talk, and if it's something that I can get to and do, then I'll go out and meet people and check out the areas.